What if the moment your teacher laughed at you became the moment that changed everything? One black teen stood in front of his class, told them he built a robot. They laughed. Even the teacher couldn't hide his smirk. But when Dante flipped the switch and that robot walked across the room, the laughter stopped. This isn't just a story about engineering. It's about doubt, resilience, and proving that quiet brilliance is still brilliance. If stories like this matter to you, subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next voice that deserves to be heard. Dante Williams was used to disappearing. In the noisy hallways of Ridgeway High, he moved like a shadow. Head down, headphones in, hoodie up. No one noticed him unless they needed someone to pick on or make a cheap joke. Especially not Mr. Holloway. Mr. Holloway, the school's veteran physics teacher, had a reputation. He was sharp-tongued, quick to dismiss, and had an eye for favorites. Those favorites never looked like Dante. They were the loud kids, the ones with Letterman jackets, or the straight-A students with parents on the PTA board. So when Mr. Holloway announced the annual Physics Showcase project, Dante already knew how it would go. "This is your chance to impress," Mr. Holloway declared, pacing across the front of the room, chalk dust trailing from his sleeves. "Show me something real, no last-minute posters, no sloppy diagrams, something substantial." Dante sat in the third row, his notebook open but mostly blank. He chewed the end of his pencil, pretending to jot down ideas like everyone else. But Dante already had an idea, a big one he'd been working on for months, in secret. After class, as students shuffled out, Mr. Holloway's voice called out over the noise. "Williams, stay back a second." Dante froze. Slowly, he approached the desk. "You planning to turn something in this year?" Holloway asked, not looking up from his grading book. Dante nodded. "Yes, sir." Holloway finally glanced up, raising an eyebrow. "Oh? And what would that be? Another cardboard volcano? Or maybe—" His smirk deepened, a copied Internet Science Fair project. Heat rose to Dante's cheeks. "I'm building a robot," he said, voice low but steady. Mr. Holloway blinked. Then he laughed, not a small chuckle, a full, sharp, disbelieving laugh that echoed around the classroom walls. Several students still lingering at the door turned to look. "A robot?" Holloway repeated, shaking his head. "Well, and that's a first. This I gotta see." He scribbled something on his attendance sheet. "Good luck with that, Williams. Try not to electrocute yourself." Dante's throat tightened. Without another word, he grabbed his bag and left the room. Maria was waiting by the lockers. She'd seen it happen, heard it too. "You okay?" she asked. Dante shrugged, keeping his gaze on the floor. "Yeah, it's fine." Maria wasn't convinced. "Don't let him get in your head." That night, as Dante stood in his family's small garage, staring at the pile of wires, servos, and scrap metal that made up his half-finished project, Mr. Holloway's laughter still rang in his ears, but underneath the humiliation, something else stirred. Determination. "I'll show him," Dante whispered, plugging in his soldering iron. "I'll show all of them." As the metal tip heated and the faint smell of melting solder filled the air, Dante got to work. Because this wasn't just about grades anymore. This was personal. The next few days became a blur of late nights and solder burns. Dante's garage transformed into a war zone of tangled wires, stripped screws, and half-empty energy drink cans. His laptop sat precariously on a stack of old textbooks, screen glowing with lines of C++ code that looked like gibberish to anyone but him. He wasn't just building a robot, he was building proof. Proof that he wasn't some lazy, disengaged kid. Proof that Mr. Holloway's laughter wouldn't be the final word, but progress wasn't smooth. Tuesday night, One of the servos overheated and burned out. Wednesday, his microcontroller short-circuited mid-test, nearly frying the whole board. By Thursday, after 4 straight nights of barely sleeping, Dante sat on the floor staring at a lifeless frame of metal and plastic and nearly broke down. Tears stung at the edges of his eyes. His chest tightened. A voice inside whispered, "Maybe they're right. Maybe this is too big for you." His phone buzzed. A text from Maria. "Don't let that man live rent-free in your head. You've got this." Dante wiped his face, laughed bitterly, and texted back, "Tell that to my fried motherboard." But even as exhaustion pulled at him, he stood, dug through his parts bin, and started soldering again. At school, things weren't better. Rumors spread. "Dante thinks he's Tony Stark now. I heard he's building a tin can that falls over." Even during class, Holloway couldn't help himself. When discussing basic circuits, the teacher glanced Dante's way. "Well, Williams, maybe you can tell us how real engineers handle voltage drops?" Smirks and scattered laughs followed. Dante said nothing. But that night, he spent 2 more hours tweaking the voltage regulator on his robot's motor controller. By Friday afternoon, the week had drained him. As he walked home, backpack heavy with textbooks, he passed the local junkyard where he'd scavenged half his parts. A rusty "No Trespassing" sign hung crooked on the fence, but Dante had made friends with the old guy who ran the place. "Mr. Rivera." Mr. Rivera spotted him from the office window and waved. "Back again?" he asked, stepping outside. "Just looking," Dante said. Mr. Rivera chuckled, wiping grease off his hands. "Still working on that project?" "Yeah." There was a pause. Then Mr. Rivera disappeared inside and came back with a small, dusty motor. "Found this yesterday," he said. "Might help with your balance issue." Dante's eyes widened. "Are you serious?" "Consider it. An early graduation gift," Rivera said with a wink. Dante grinned, holding the motor like treasure. As he left, Maria's earlier text echoed in his mind. "You've got this." Maybe, just maybe, she was right. With a new motor in hand, Dante headed home. And as the sun set behind him, he made a silent promise. Tomorrow, he'd make it walk. No matter what. Friday night. The garage was dim, lit only by the pale yellow glow of a desk lamp Dante had borrowed from the living room. The air smelled of solder, metal, and determination. The new motor from Mr. Rivera sat installed, wires freshly twisted and taped, but nothing was working the way it should. Dante sat cross-legged on the cold floor, laptop open, code scrolling past faster than he could track. The balance algorithm kept failing. The left leg motor stalled. The gyroscope readings glitched every third loop. It felt like the entire universe was conspiring against him. At 11:45 p.m., he ran a test sequence. The robot took a single step forward, then tipped sideways and crashed hard against the garage floor. The sound echoed, sharp and final. Dante froze. Then, slowly, he buried his face in his hands. Tears came before he could stop them. Weeks of work, sleepless nights, endless jokes at school, Mr. Holloway's mocking laughter, Jason's snide comments. And for what? A broken pile of plastic and wires. He sat there for what felt like forever, breathing unevenly, shoulders shaking. In the corner of the garage, his phone buzzed again. Another text from Maria. "No matter what happens tomorrow, I'm proud of you. Just thought you should know." Dante let out a shaky breath. Her words settled over him like a warm blanket. He stood, wiping his face roughly with the sleeve of his hoodie. His gaze shifted back to the robot, dented, scratched, but not done. "Okay," he whispered. "Last chance." He opened his laptop, created a new script, file name, Desperation Run V1. This time, he stripped the balance algorithm down to its simplest form, adjusted the motor timing, added a manual override for tilt correction. Then, holding his breath, he connected the battery. The robot's LED indicators flickered. Yellow, then green. "Please," Dante whispered. He tapped the command key. For a split second, nothing. Then, the robot's legs twitched, the servos whirred, slowly, shakily. It lifted one foot, shifted its center of gravity, took one small, hesitant step. Dante gasped, then another step, and another. It wasn't fast, it wasn't elegant, but it was walking. Tears welled again, but this time from pure relief. Dante laughed. Not loud, but real. His robot was walking. At 1:07 a.m., Dante recorded a 10-second clip on his phone, just in case it failed again by morning, just to prove to himself that this wasn't a dream. He collapsed onto an old beanbag chair in the corner, exhausted but smiling. Tomorrow, everything would change. Saturday morning. Dante barely slept. His alarm went off at 6:30 a.m., but he'd already been awake, lying in bed, staring at the ceiling. His stomach twisted in knots. Today was showcase day. By 7:45, he stood at the bus stop, carefully holding the cardboard box that carried his robot. Every bump, every jolt made him wince. He patted the interior with old t-shirts, praying nothing shifted. On the ride to school, he barely noticed the conversations around him. Jason's bringing in a catapult. Emily's doing something with magnets. I heard Dante's bringing a robot. Yeah, right. The whispers followed him all the way through the school gates. When Dante entered the classroom, students were already setting up their projects. Jason had his slingshot contraption spread across 2 desks. Emily was testing a levitation experiment with a small magnet array. Maria sat near the back, eyes scanning for him. When she saw Dante walk in, she smiled and gave him a quiet thumbs up. But Mr. Holloway was waiting, arms crossed, standing by the whiteboard. "Well, well, Williams," he said, loud enough for the whole class to hear. "Glad you decided to show. Thought maybe you'd gotten cold feet." Scattered chuckles filled the room. Dante said nothing. He made his way to the far corner, opened the box carefully, and began checking the wires. Jason sauntered over, peeking inside. "Is that it?" Jason snorted. "Dude, it looks like a science fair reject." Dante ignored him. His heart pounded in his chest as he checked the battery connection, testing voltage levels on his multimeter. Everything still holding. Mr. Holloway clapped his hands to get the class's attention. "All right, people, let's get started. One by one, let's show what we've got." The presentations began. Jason's catapult misfired, nearly hitting a ceiling tile. The class laughed, but in a friendly way. Emily's magnets lifted a small metal disc, drawing applause. After several other projects, Mr. Holloway looked at the attendance sheet. His gaze shifted deliberately. "Last, but certainly not least," he said, voice thick with sarcasm. "Dante Williams and his robot." Snickers echoed across the room. Dante's throat tightened. Maria caught his eye from her seat and mouthed, "You've got this." With shaking hands, Dante lifted the robot from the box. He placed it on the classroom floor, right in front of the whiteboard. The air changed. The students leaned forward, their curiosity now mingling with doubt. Mr. Holloway crossed his arms, raising an eyebrow. "Well," the teacher said, "let's see it walk, Williams." The entire room fell silent. Dante knelt beside the robot. His fingers trembled as he reached for the power switch. He closed his eyes for a second, took one deep, grounding breath, and flipped it on. A low hum filled the air. The LED lights blinked to life. Green. Servos engaged. And then the robot shifted, lifted one metal foot, and took a step, then another, and another. It crossed the floor, wobbly but determined, moving straight across the classroom. A ripple ran through the room. Gasps, wide eyes, Jason's jaw dropped. Emily covered her mouth. Maria beamed. Mr. Holloway, for the first time all semester. He was speechless. His smirk vanished. His arms slowly uncrossed as he watched the impossible unfold right in front of him. Dante stood, watching his robot, and for the first time felt the full weight of triumph. But this wasn't over yet, not even close. For several long seconds, the classroom stayed frozen. No one moved. No one spoke. The only sound was the soft whir of Dante's robot completing its programmed sequence, turning, stopping, then standing perfectly still in the middle of the floor. Dante stood there, hands at his sides, chest rising and falling fast, adrenaline still surging through him. Maria was the first to react. She jumped from her seat and clapped, once, loud and clear. It startled the room. Then another student joined, then another. By the time the entire class broke into applause, Dante barely knew how to process it. Jason's face was pale. Emily blinked, like she wasn't sure this was real. And Mr. Holloway, he stayed near the whiteboard, staring at the robot like it had just spoken a foreign language. Slowly, the teacher stepped forward. "Well, I'll admit," Mr. Holloway said, voice low, trying to sound measured. "That's impressive." But the words felt forced, hollow, like swallowing pride tasted bitter in his mouth. Dante narrowed his eyes. For weeks, for months, this man had dismissed him, had turned him into a classroom joke. And now, Mr. Holloway wanted to play the supportive mentor? Dante's voice cut through the applause. "Guess I didn't electrocute myself after all," he said, loud enough for the whole class to hear. The room went silent again. A few students gasped. Jason's eyes went wide. Emily covered her mouth. Maria? She just smiled, eyes shining. Mr. Holloway opened his mouth to respond, but nothing came out. For once, he had no comeback. The bell rang, signaling the end of the showcase. Students rushed forward to get a closer look at the robot. "Dude, how did you program that? Where'd you get the parts? Can you help me with my project next time?" Dante answered a few questions, but his eyes kept drifting toward the door. Maria caught up with him in the hallway. "That was epic," she said, nudging him. Dante gave her a tired grin. "Still feels unreal." "You earned this," Maria said softly. "Every second of it." As they walked toward their lockers, Dante's phone buzzed. An email notification. He opened it and froze. Subject line, "Congratulations. Regional STEM Expo invitation, priority entry." His breath caught. Maria peeked over his shoulder. "Wait, that's huge." Dante stared at the screen. The Regional STEM Expo was the biggest high school engineering event in the state. Only top students, hand-picked, got in. And somehow, he was one of them. He laughed, a sound full of disbelief and joy. Maria laughed with him. Down the hall, Mr. Holloway stood near the teacher's lounge door, watching them. For a split second, their eyes met. Mr. Holloway gave him a small, stiff nod. Not full approval, but acknowledgement. And for now, that was enough. The following week felt like a whirlwind. Emails poured in. Local teachers congratulated him in the hallways. Even students from other grades started stopping him in the lunchroom. "Hey, you're the robot guy, right? Can I see it? Are you really going to the STEM Expo?" Dante answered with a smile, still not fully believing it himself. Maria sat beside him at lunch one day, scrolling through the event website on her phone. "Do you even realize who's going to be there?" she said, eyes wide. "Tech recruiters, university reps, news media, this is huge." Dante laughed nervously. "Yeah, no pressure, right?" But inside, the anxiety built. Nights in the garage became long again, tuning, updating code, fixing minor balance issues. Unlike before, this time he wasn't fighting loneliness. Maria showed up some evenings, bringing snacks, offering to hold wires, even helping organize his presentation notes. They laughed over old inside jokes, listened to playlists full of lo-fi beats and 90s R&B. It felt different now. But one thing still gnawed at him: Mr. Holloway. The teacher barely said more than a passing "good job" since the showcase. Dante didn't want validation. Exactly, but part of him wanted something. Maybe acknowledgement that all the months of doubt, sarcasm, and classroom humiliation hadn't been for nothing. 2 days before the expo, Dante stayed late after school to use the physics lab's 3D printer for a last-minute robot modification. As he packed up, he felt someone standing at the door. "Mr. Holloway." The teacher crossed his arms, shifting awkwardly. "I saw your name on the expo participant list," Holloway said, tone even. Dante nodded. "Yeah." Long pause. "You'll be representing Ridgeway High," Holloway added. Another pause. "I hope you'll make us proud." Dante blinked. It wasn't an apology, not by a long shot. But for Mr. Holloway, it was as close as he'd ever get. Dante gave a small nod. "I plan to." As he left the room, Maria caught up with him by the front steps. "How bad was that awkward teacher pep talk?" she teased. Dante grinned. Painfully awkward, but kinda worth it. They both laughed. That night, as Dante packed the robot carefully into a reinforced case borrowed from Mr. Rivera at the junkyard, he felt something shift inside him. Nervous? Yes. But this time, there was also pride. For the first time, he wasn't walking into a room to prove he belonged. He was walking in, knowing he did. The day of the STEM Expo arrived with crisp morning air and a sky so blue it felt unreal. Dante's mom drove him to the event center an hour early. She couldn't stop smiling in the front seat, her eyes glistening every time she glanced at him through the rearview mirror. "You nervous, baby?" she asked. Dante adjusted his tie, a last-minute addition Maria insisted on. "Little bit," he admitted. His mom reached over, squeezed his hand. "No matter what happens, you've already won." When they arrived, the event hall was buzzing. Booths lined with futuristic projects stretched wall to wall. Students from across the state hovered near 3D printers, VR headsets, drone cages. Dante found his designated spot, booth number 46. He set his robot carefully on the display table, checking every wire, every motor. Maria texted, "We're at the front row, ready to cheer like maniacs." Dante smiled, heart racing. The judges made their rounds. University professors, engineers, even a local tech journalist. When they reached Dante's booth, one of the judges, a robotics researcher from UT Austin, paused longer than the rest. "You built this entirely on your own?" she asked, scanning the schematics he'd taped next to the display. "Yes, ma'am," Dante said. "Mostly from scrap parts. The balance algorithm took a few late nights." The judge laughed softly. "Well, let's see it walk." Dante took a breath, flipped the switch. The robot came to life, more fluid than ever, walking a full-programmed path, turning, stopping, even performing a small bow at the end, an extra trick Dante coded just for today. The crowd around the booth applauded. A reporter snapped photos. Maria and 2 classmates cheered from the side. For the first time in his life, Dante didn't feel like he was fighting to be seen. He was seen. He was celebrated. Hours later, during the closing ceremony, Dante sat near the back, fidgeting with his lanyard. And now, the Best Engineering Innovation Award, the announcer's voice boomed. Dante's heart thudded. And the winner is Dante Williams from Ridgeway High School. For a second, he didn't move. Maria shouted, "Go, that's you." Stumbling to his feet, Dante made his way to the stage. The lights were blinding, the applause overwhelming. As the medal was placed around his neck, he scanned the audience. And there, near the exit, standing awkwardly among the crowd, Mr. Holloway, not clapping, but standing, watching. And when their eyes met, Mr. Holloway gave him a single, stiff nod. Dante smiled to himself. It wasn't forgiveness, wasn't redemption. But it was something. And for now, that was enough. Monday morning. The same hallways Dante had walked through in silence for years. Felt completely different now. Students pointed as he passed. Some waved. Others gave him nods, the kind of silent respect that didn't need words. At his locker, Jason walked over. For the first time, no jokes, no snide comments. "Hey, Jason scratched the back of his neck awkwardly. "That robot was crazy, man." Congrats, Dante raised an eyebrow but smiled. "Thanks." Even Emily stopped him near the science wing. "If you're ever open to tutoring," she said hesitantly, "I could use help with programming." Dante laughed softly. "Sure." But it wasn't until physics class that the final, most unexpected moment happened. Mr. Holloway stood at the front as usual, preparing the day's lecture on torque and rotational motion. But before starting, he cleared his throat. "Before we begin," he glanced around the room, "I want to acknowledge one of our own." Dante froze. This past weekend, Dante Williams represented Ridgeway High at the State STEM Expo and won Best Engineering Innovation. The class broke into applause. Holloway's face stayed tight, but for the first time, there was something genuine in his tone. "Congratulations, Williams," he said, voice steady. Dante gave a small nod. "Thank you, sir." Maria caught his eye from across the room, grinning. The lecture started. Equations filled the board. But Dante sat back in his chair, a small, quiet smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. He wasn't invisible anymore. He wasn't a punchline. He was the kid who built the robot and made it walk across the room. And as he glanced at the open notebook on his desk, he started sketching designs for his next project. Because this was only the beginning. Dante didn't fight back with insults or anger. He fought back with action, with wires, with code, with a robot that walked across the room and erased every doubt along the way. His story is a quiet reminder that sometimes the most powerful answers don't come in words, they come, one determined step at a time. If you've ever felt underestimated or doubted yourself, let Dante's story be your reminder to keep building, keep dreaming, and never let anyone decide your limits for you. And if stories like this stay with you, subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss the next story. That deserves to be heard.